Okay. The annual Fitch-Rona EMS meeting is called to order at 7:01. Michelle, if you could do the roll.
Might help if I unmute my microphone.
Hope so.
All right, for the commission, Strassman.
Here.
Hilla.
Here.
Roberts. Cronin.
Present.
Johnson.
Here.
Miller. Lonsdorf.
Here.
Schnapp.
Here.
Lugo.
Here.
Chief Anderson.
I am present.
Deputy Chief Dostalek.
I am present as well.
All right, and now I'd like to ask each of the municipalities for their council members. City of Fitchburg, are there any council members present?
There's just me.
Okay. How about
Like the
Town of
mayor's,
Verona?
the mayor is just joining us, Michelle.
Okay,
Town of Verona has myself, Mark Geller, Chair, and Dave Lonsdorf, Supervisor. And I haven't seen if Supervisor Wiederheft is joined us yet.
I'm here.
Okay, and Supervisor Wiederheft.
all right. And then City of Verona, any council members present?
Mara Helmke, District 2.
And Heather Reiki, District 4.
Okay, is that it?
You caught Mayor Richardson from City of Fitchburg.
Yep,
And did you catch Adam Sayer from City of Verona?
City of Verona,
Administrator?
yep, I do have him down.
Okay. And then as we'll see public comment here, Kyle Wells, one of our Fitrona medics, is on as well.
Okay, Kyle, go ahead.
All righty, thanks, Terry. It's climactic. Usually there's a lot more people here for this. So, all right, well, good evening, everyone. So I want to begin by thanking all of the Fitrona commissioners, both past and present, for supporting us and sharing in our vision of the future of EMS. In an era of diluted professional skills, your continued support has provided for us to become the standard for EMS in our region. Much like our peers in New York and Chicago, being a standalone or third service EMS organization has allowed us to focus on our craft and deliver the best possible care to the people in our district. Fitrona has served as a model for standalone EMS in the region. Other organizations in Dane County have already followed our lead in things like creating EMS districts, training far beyond licensure requirements, or even paramedic internships, and we're not yet done leading the way. Even now, Middleton, Waunakee, and Cross Plains are considering forming an EMS district similar to that of Fitrona. Furthermore, by studying industry leaders like King, Wake, Hennepin, and Austin Travis County third service EMS systems, and with your continued support, we will remain at the forefront of pre-hospital healthcare in our region. Lastly, I want to thank those officials that have recognized the intense pressures that the Fitrona staff has gone through over the last 2 years and have reached out to us. Our call volume has skyrocketed, and the severity of emergencies has taken on an entirely new and intense level. This is all added on top of navigating through the initial stages of the pandemic when we knew very little about the nature of COVID, other than it was both deadly and very contagious. Yet we geared up and we went in. We rendered care in a vacuum of our customary resources by keeping our fire and police partners safely out of the scene as much as possible, but we got the job done. So, to my coworkers at Fitch, thank you for being there with me. And for all of those that have reached out to us, a sincere thank you. Thanks for the time, Terry.
Yep, well, thank you for your comments, Kyle. And thank you for what you do and all the staff do. We
You're
appreciate it.
welcome. And I appreciate that. We all do.
Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the 2021 annual meeting. Kind of a reminder that the procedures are a little different. In this meeting, all the motions and voting is done by the municipalities, not by the commission, which is a little different than our normal monthly meeting. And I would like to thank all the municipalities and all of the council members and town supervisors for your support of the ES Commission and the valuable work that it does. I think you have a EMS service, as Kyle so eloquently stated, that you can be proud of, and we are probably one of the better ones in the nation, in Wisconsin for sure, so you can be proud of what we have. So thank you for attending the meeting, and I will go into the review and approval of the meeting minutes from last year, October 15th, 2020. Are there any comments from the municipalities, any corrections? If not, if there's a motion to approve.
Moved by Fitchburg.
I
Second
second.
by
All in favor, signify saying aye.
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 And all three approve. So the minutes as submitted are approved. Chief Anderson, you want to go ahead into your chief's report and presentation?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Kyle, as well, reflecting kind of how all of the staff feels here. And as I try to remind our commission every month, end our meetings with a thank you very much for your support. We get a lot of support from our communities, being very connected throughout the county and throughout the state as well, with some connections from our previous lives. I'm very fortunate. I count us as a district to be very, very fortunate and be very grateful to the support we get from all of you, because that is not at all the case in a lot of other communities. So thank you. Chief's report, it's always a little bit different this month for the new council members and supervisors. I present this information every month to our EMS commission. You're always more than welcome. Love the virtual platform, makes it a little easier to dial in from home. It's always the third Thursday of every month at 7 p.m. Those agendas are sent out and hopefully you can connect. Otherwise, I'm more than happy to connect with you directly and we can include you in these so you know what's going on. A little more robust chief report as we get into the annual meeting here to provide you a little bit more of a kind of a state of the state of Fitrona. So love this picture. This picture is a couple years old. This I brought this up in the past. This picture was taken in 2019, August 1st of 2019. So this was actually the first day we put that third ambulance in service. It's not all of our staff in the picture. That very first day at 7 a.m. again, August 1st of 2019. Love our staff that comes in a little bit early. The shift starts at 7. All of those new hires, that new staff came in, and all 3 trucks were on the road by 6:50. So 10 minutes before that third ambulance even went in service, we had all 3 calls, all 3 trucks on the road. So the picture's a couple years old. The intent was to do one every 2 years. In the interest of kind of COVID, we didn't do one this year with a lot of other stuff going on, but we'll continue to update these pictures. But this is the current staff. On the left-hand side, you see that full-time staff with our office manager. On the right-hand side, our pool of LTEs. We did actually add a couple of EMTs this year as we started kind of getting more involved with the Alliant Energy Center for new non-commissioned members in the town of Madison. So the town of Madison still exists, but about a year ago, the fire department was dissolved. It was being this close to the end of the existence of the town. It wasn't sustainable anymore. So the town of Madison fire department, fire and EMS service actually dissolved. The city of Madison took over all of the town for the time being. Next year is the year the town officially dissolves. But we were approached to kind of by the Alliant Energy Center to assist them, which lives in the town of Madison, to provide EMS support for events at the Alliant Energy Center campus. Reached out with my partners, Chief Davis out at the City of Madison Fire Department, said, "Are you okay with this?" His response was, "The City of Madison has more than enough events between the campus, Camp Randall, the Cole Center. They were more than happy to kind of share this event space with us. So we actually started supporting many of these special events at the Alliant Energy Center. A couple of them last year, getting more into it this year. We actually brought some EMTs on board to help kind of supplement our own staffing that. So you'll see those names on there. We've got a couple of them as our first kind of venture into having staffed EMT or a combined service. So we send out one medic and one EMT. Right now it's only at special events. All of our 911 ambulances are still dual medic. That is our plan for the future. So it's truly just the special events at this point. But they've been able to kind of help a little bit. And we're not burning out our staff as they're continuing just to cover all the open shifts we have here. And then we have, so Dr. Mancera, who was in here, we kind of missed him during roll call. He's going to speak a little bit after the end of my chief's report and kind of give you an update on Fitrona's participation in a statewide, nationwide reporting system with cardiac care. But so he is our primary physician. Our medical director works very intricately with us. Third Tuesday of every month, pretty much every month anyway. Comes in and does some run review with us, very specific to Fitch-Rona, largely attended by our own staff, but really looks at our own internal, like some significant calls, some significant disease processes, and we get some phenomenal turnout and do that internal training. Dr. Lohmeyer is kind of one of his compatriots as well, who helps us out through the UW system, as well as the UW system, and he may be able to extrapolate a little bit more on it, has an EMS fellowship program. So Dr. Dar is currently the fellow that we see this year. We had Emily Fleming last year, so she helps out as well, kind of giving us lots of that physician oversight and involvement. So that's the picture. That's some faces to put with some of the names that we have here at Fitrona. Statistics of Fitrona for anyone who is unaware of them. So based on the current Department of Administration, so 45,000 people in between the city of Fitchburg, the city of Verona, and the Verona Township. So if we actually look at the 22 budget that was presented, if we take away what we estimate to be run income, so the rest of what truly the taxpayers end up paying based on that population, our cost per capita to operate Fitch-Rona is $37.34 per taxpayer. So every year the county actually does do a report and shares that through every other EMS agency in the county. We are smack dab in the middle of what it costs to run a service here in Dane County. So a pretty, I like looking at it that way versus the $3.whatever million it takes to run this place. Really like saying it's a much more, I think, easier pill to chew when you say every taxpayer is paying $37 to have 3 paramedic ambulance services sitting in their district to take care of them. So phenomenal, we'll call it the bargain that our municipalities get for what they're getting here at our service. 71 square miles. As I mentioned, we do have 3 paramedic ambulances, dual staff paramedics. They're here 24/7 every day. We have 5 ambulances in our fleet. There's the numbers there. 3 of them are in service at any one time. We have 2 of them, I call them reserve ambulances. I'll talk about what we use them for later. We have 2 support vehicles. The C stands for car. So we have car 15, car 17. Those are what Jeff and I use to respond to calls if needed, as well as just running supplies in between substation. Predominantly they're used for running things around between the 2 stations and making stuff happen. So the two support vehicles. And then I believe I brought it up last year. We actually have a support trailer. It's the complicated FRRH1. It's a rehab trailer. Was donated. The trailer itself was donated by Dane County, as we were able to take it for free and repurpose it using some money from some donations. We were able to actually kind of support that or fill it with. It actually has some chairs. It has a tent. It's got water. It's got food. It's got some rations. Take it out a handful of times a year. We have supported a couple of trainings with it. Went to the cross country meet with it. We can take it in better support of a large fire incident. All that equipment in one place, as opposed to we had it previously spread out between 3 different stations. We got one all in one place. We can hook it up to one of those support vehicles and pull it out to a fire and help support the fire crews from an EMS standpoint. A little bit of an overview of what Fitrona is. This is what our district looks like. We have 3 stations. You can see where they're at. We have the one in Verona. Our second one is off of Marketplace and McKee Road. And then that third station we opened up in 2019 off of South Said. As far as staffing goes, we have 21 full-time paramedics, 2 administrative staff. That's Jeff and I. Like to call us, we both do have paramedic licenses, but predominantly most of our jobs are sitting in the office and actually doing QA and paperwork and scheduling and what we do, right? The administrative behind the scenes things. So really it's the recognition of we have 21 full-time paramedics who really do the job, and Jeff and I are here to support them. 1 part-time office manager, Michelle, who's a lifesaver on taking minutes and paying bills and helping me out. We have 16, as of this snapshot in time, we have 16 LTE paramedics. So they want to kind of call them equivalent of a part-time medic versus the LTE. The true part-time nomenclature is addressed in the union contract. So we don't have any part-time paramedics per se. What we have, we call them limited term paramedics. So they're never guaranteed hours. We just have a pool. They do pick up a lot of hours for them. We would be lost without them. There is a huge financial impact we would have without them. So they do play a huge role here at Fitrona as well. The majority of them work at services elsewhere, and they're able to give us time here to help us out. Mentioned we have 3 LTE EMTs, and then we have, I'd like to recognize every year, we have Tom Bates. He is our 1 volunteer paramedic still. He's been here since, I believe, 1997. He's going on 30 years, rides about every other Sunday for about 4 hours, comes in and rides with the crew. So, and still does that for free. So he's still hanging in there. Love to list him every year. So this is the meat of the chief's report that I give every month. I actually do take this and I do send this out to our staff. I send it out to the city administrators, the town planner, and mayors, and Mark, your town board president, as well as our docs. So they do see this every month. If this is something you'd love to see, reach out to them. They see this every month. It gives us a snapshot of where we're at. The phenomenal, and Kyle alluded it to his when he was talking in his comments. We are currently at an 18% increase in call volume for this year. Historically, that is between 3 and 5. So it is an unprecedented call volume. You can see where we're at now. We did, though we went up in 2020, our increase from 2019 to 2020 was only about a 2% increase, so a little lower than that 3 to 5 we usually see. So that can attribute a little bit to the bigger gain in 2021, but it's been broad. I can report this every month through our commission. I've not been able to put a finger on what is causing this. I have reached out to my colleagues across the county here. Most of them are seeing an increase as well, but none of them are seeing the increase that we are seeing. Have not been able to figure out what it is. It is not one particular area. It is not one particular type of call. It is truly at this point just volume. So keeping that in mind, you'll see what these huge increases are, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, kind of where that takes us in the future. But this is where we are compared to the last 2 years. Based on all the different type of the different municipalities and the places we go. So we report every month where we're going every month, and then we do this kind of on track of where we're at for the year. Again, historically, this is pretty spot on. Fitchburg seems to be growing just a little bit more. Historically, it's about a 60% volume increase in Fitchburg, so they're creeping up just a little bit. But so is the town of Verona. I'm sorry, the city of Verona. But that's also offset with us going into some of the other municipalities. So in the big picture, that's where we are going. This is what it looks like. This is just a monthly snapshot. So we just change it up a little bit, right? The graphs versus a chart by municipality in September. 63% of our calls in Fitchburg, 26% in Verona, 2% in the town of Verona, and then roughly about 9% of our calls are outside of our district. One of the other things I look at every month, we report this, I share this with staff, and I'd like to do this, is our fractal times, because these are our benchmarks, right? How long is it taking us to get out the door? How long is it taking us to get to scenes? How long are we sitting on scenes? The transport time is a number we cannot control, right? There's a physical distance that we cannot overcome between a scene or a home to the hospital. And then how long does it take at the hospital to clean things up and get that truck back in service? These are all numbers to look at as we start looking at future growth and capacity, because this is the amount of time that resources are not available to respond to another call, right? So when I add all of those up, it's roughly an hour. So about every call we have, that takes that ambulance out of service for an hour. More and more, as you saw with our volume there, we are seeing all 3 ambulances out. And we have neighboring ambulances, right? I would love to put an ambulance on every corner and everybody can have an ambulance within 5 minutes of their houses. It's cost prohibitive, right? We're never going to be able to do it. So we have partnerships, City of Madison, Middleton. When they need help, we go in there. When we need help, they come in here. But these are numbers we look at, again, our big benchmarks. And this is also what helps determine station location. As you can see here, love the graph. So the big number we look at, we call that unit notified to arrive on scene, right? So this is when you call 911 and the PSAP, we call it, it's the 911 center, it's the public safety answering point. When they pick up the phone, the clock starts, it's time stamped. When we get to your house, we pick up the radio and say, I'm at somebody's house that is time stamped. The goal, the national standard in an urban environment is to be at somebody's house in 9 minutes, less than 9 minutes, 90% of the time. So we aren't in an urban environment. We live in a suburban environment. So that gets altered just a little bit when you get down to places like Oak Hill. It tweaks a little bit. But by just looking at this, the location, you can see what happened when on August 1st of 2019, when that 3rd station, I take it back. Ideally, on August 1st of 2019, when that 3rd station went in business, we would have seen a drop in that fractal time. What happened is the overhead paging system didn't work until December. So we actually had a couple of months there where we relied on pagers, which we normally do. But Dane County actually has what's called a pre-alert system, which means when you pick up the phone and say Patrick needs an ambulance at his house, as soon as they type in and verify your address, we actually get alerted that there's an ambulance needed at your house. We don't know what it is, just that happens. So an ambulance is heading your direction, having no idea what it is. It is well documented that it has about a 90 seconds savings in time to get you out the door. So from the graph, you can actually see the day we turned that pre-alert on, we dropped almost a minute or so off of our fractal times. And that was truly the location of that 3rd ambulance and making sure that that pre-alert turned on. So we're still hovering right over that 9-minute mark, but considering our response area, it's actually pretty good. Other thing that we track is as far as how long does it take us to get to our different scenes. We've been doing this by zones, and we've actually been doing this by zones before I got here. So for 20 years, we've been tracking response times by zones. A little bit challenging in our district because we don't have one single zip code to track people by. So you pull out a 5353, whatever the Oregon zip code is. Right? That's part of Fitchburg, part of Fitrona. So we've been doing this by zones for years. So here's the locations of our 3 stations. And then this is what we look at about how long it takes us to get there. The top number you'll see there is the number of calls we have in that area. So it kind of makes sense. A sparsely populated zone 1 is a 0.87% of our calls. We don't get a lot of calls there. You go down to zone 11, where there's probably about 15 people who live down there, right? 0.03% of our calls occur down there. Now, those people pay taxes in the city of Fitchburg. They would like an ambulance to respond fairly quickly to their home as well. So we do take them into consideration. But when we start looking at ambulance locations, this is what we look at. When you break it down between Fitchburg and Fitrona, again, these are best guesses. Those 3 stars are where our ambulances are located at. At any one time, if the Fitrona ambulance is passing through the city of Fitchburg on their way back from a call and a call occurs right next to them, they will be diverted to go to that call. So these aren't 100%, right? So it's going to be listed at that. We just assume the Fitrona ambulance is coming from Fitrona. That is not always the case. But when we look at them, the majority of the time, we are out the door, similar to those fractal times. Our crews are out the door and on a scene within about 5 to 6 minutes. So targets, we're absolutely meeting our targets. When we start looking at growth, this is what we're going to kind of look at to say, where does that 3rd ambulance need to be and how long does it take to get there? I will absolutely share this slide deck to the city administrators tomorrow morning so that they can send all of this to you. So you'll have this information as well. A couple of years ago, the state of Wisconsin purchased kind of a module onto all of our reports are uploaded into a state database. We have access to only my information, but that actually database allowed us to produce some heat maps. So I really like the heat map. This is our district with a heat map. So guess where we're going? you can kind of make some assumptions of who are the utilizers of our call. Now, this is actually the last 12 months. So it's October of this year through November of last year. One thing I will say with that big hotspot in Verona, if you'll remember this whole time frame, in case you didn't forget about COVID within the last 12 months, Verona had actually a pretty big COVID outbreak in our I don't want to call it a COVID outbreak. We had a lot of patients with COVID in some of our senior housing centers here in Verona. So that is why that heat, that little that bright red dot there turned a lot brighter red this year than it has in previous years. Otherwise, you'll see that is our senior housing centers, right? That's all those calls are. Again, as we look to future growth, where do we put those ambulances? When do we put those ambulances? These are the places they need to go. Call by day of the week. This is just reflective of last month. The red line is the median. Most of the days, nobody wants, we go to work on Monday. By Friday, we don't want to go anymore. We end up going to the hospital. There was some quirk last month on Wednesdays. Nobody really wanted to go to the hospital, or nobody wanted to go to work. So they were all calling 911 on Wednesdays. Hour of the day, and the blue line is your spike. What specifically occurred last month, we take that and put into a median over the course of the year. That's what it looks like. As I've mentioned in previous years, and we'll talk again this year, when we start to add more assets, right? We've met our capacity, all of our ambulances out, and we have to call our neighbors in. One of our options is actually to put in a peak time ambulance, right? So we don't need an ambulance, according to this, at 3 in the morning, we don't get a lot of calls. We still get calls, we don't get a lot of calls. So I don't necessarily need 4 ambulances at 3 in the morning. I need 4 ambulances at 6 o'clock in the evening. I need 4 ambulances at noon. So as we look forward into some different staffing options, we look at this and go, when are those timeframes that we can best need more vehicles? Every month I report this. This is just really information to share. What are we going to? So pick the top 70% of the calls we go to, and our commission members can verify this. These don't really change much very many months at all. Usually sick person and falls just swaps back and forth, but those have been the top 2 for probably the last 5 years. The rest of those just kind of hop around, but most of them stay kind of at that top 70%. These are the things we're going to. And then it's always interesting with that 3rd ambulance, right? Who is the busy station? So the crews can pick where they want to go, and they do rotate through between stations. And it's the nature of emergency services. Our average call is 12 calls a day, but that is the average. So that is like between 3 calls and 25 calls. So between there somewhere, that is where we hit that average. The busiest station, as you can imagine, is that station number 2 on Marketplace, which is smack dab in the middle of the district. So it has kind of the widest wingspan when we're looking at closest ambulances. All of our ambulances are dispatched. They have vehicle locators in them. When they're in the stations, that is considered their home. So when a 911 calls in, it's not the Verona gets a Verona ambulance and a Fitchburg gets a Fitchburg ambulance. Any patient that calls in gets the closest ambulance in our district. Based on the acuity and based on how sick they are, it's entirely possible if there is an ambulance outside of our district, they will actually get that ambulance. So a handful of homes on Greenway Cross, a handful of homes on the north side of Verona. If a city ambulance is actually in quarters, they are closer than a Fitch-Rona ambulance. They will actually get an ambulance from a neighboring service, and based on kind of that acuity. Same thing happens for us. There are places in the city of Madison that we are closer to. We will go into the city of Madison system as well. That occurred about 10 years ago. We have a borderless ALS system is what that's referred to. So that is actually just the information that I report every month to our commission members, just to give them a snapshot of where we're at. We are reporting financials as well. So this is the aging report for just the month, or I'm saying the aging report where everything sits at as of the month of September. So you'll actually see, or at least the commission members will notice, something is very off this month. Normally we are spot on where those goals are. The month of September, about the middle of September, we just got actually the notification from our billing company. So the company that our billing company uses was actually a victim of some ransomware. So we got that email from them, and that was shared with our commission members via email. It was recognized right away. We got the assurance from them. The FBI was involved. No patient information was ever compromised. It was caught very quickly. But it sounds like over the course of about 2 weeks ago, over the course of about 2 weeks in September, they did not have access to bill. So the finances came in and we did receive that money, they were unable to bill any calls for about 2 weeks. That has since all caught up. About August 2nd or so, we got the email from them explaining what happened. I know that Brad, who's our representative there, gave us we are working through the weekend to get your calls billed. But that is why you're actually going to see this aging report be pretty skewed. Normally everything is spot on. There was about 2 weeks last month and nothing was billed. So this is something we will look at in the future here to make sure that we get back on track. The other stuff we look at here is our income. Again, this is reported monthly in there. So our true cash on hand. We work at Oak Bank. It's been a phenomenal partner. I give them a shout out every year in Fitchburg. They work with us pretty well. So we have a checking account and a money market account that are tied together. The money is just moved back and forth as we need it in the checking account. Otherwise, the balance sits in that money market and anyways, historically used to earn better interest than it did in any other account. That's not really the case these days, but the two of them together give us that money that we use for our operational balances. Our savings account is used for donations, for grants, and we have FAP funds. So FAP funds are money we receive from the state every year. They are earmarked. They must be used for specific purposes dictated by the state. We have to keep track of that. Every year we get funds. Every year I have to report back what we use those funds for within what we're allowed to at the state. So that is where that money sits. The reason you see those big swings in there, this is about the time of the year where we get our EPIC grant. So that's why you see these large deposits and these large removals every year based on when we get the money and when we're able to purchase the money, purchase the items that we asked for through the EPIC grant. This year they gave us funding for what we did was actually purchase. So last year with our CARES funding we got from the state to, from the federal government to assist with the COVID response, we purchased transport ventilators, allowing us to stay, our crews to stay a much farther distance away from a patient to help kind of prevent that, close contact with an airborne pathogen. So we were able to purchase 3 transport ventilators last year with that CARES funding. We have 5 trucks. So this year we actually put in for 2 more ventilators. Previously, EPIC paid for, we call it a Lucas device or a mechanical CPR device. So patients in cardiac arrest, right, we do a bunch of compressions. We try to keep that consistent compressions, but we know that people get tired. We can be inconsistent. We can be off the chest. They make a device, a mechanical device, snaps on the chest and does those compressions. 2 years ago, EPIC gave us funds for 3 of them. Again, we had 3 trucks. We had 3 trucks with compression devices and ventilators. This year, I asked EPIC to complete that, and we got money for 2 more ventilators. We got 1 more Lucas device. We had purchased 1 with our new ambulance. As of this year, I still haven't got my ventilators yet, but with those funds, all 5 of our trucks will actually be equipped exactly the same with transport ventilators, compression devices, power cots. They can move freely between all of our ambulances. Within about half an hour, we've kind of done some testing in the past. About half an hour, we can put a 4th truck in the rig. A 4th truck in the road. Jeff and I are both here. We could actually walk out and take that truck out the door right now. We'd probably grab one of the other crew members. So as we dust off like our pens and pencils and stuff that we do all day. So we'll grab them with the experience. We'll head out the door. Otherwise, usually within an hour or 2, we can get another crew in here, which has occurred. And we've had all 5 trucks on the road. So again, another shout out to EPIC, who's been a phenomenal partner in providing us with some really good equipment. Oak Bank, we have 1 CD that is sitting out there that just sits there in earned interest. We kind of use that as part of, identified as earmarked as part of some of our reserve fund. And then 2 years ago, we used to have a bunch of CDs at Oak Bank. We diversified based on kind of our insurability or the insurance through Oak Bank. And based on kind of a recommendation, the city of Fitchburg uses the Wisconsin Investment something co-op. Essentially, it's an investment company that works with municipalities. So we actually took some of our funds and gave it to WISC to invest for us. That's at the bottom of the sheet. I'm going to explain a little bit more about that. But that is all of our funds to give you a snapshot of where we're at financially. We do have some assigned funds. These come from the commission with the exception of FAP, which is state dictated. We have the funds when we sell 1 ambulance, we use those funds to purchase the next ambulance. There's our FAP funds, previous EPIC grants to support our bike medic program. We finally used up the rest of those funds this year. So we'll have to put that into a budget budget line item in years to come. Really, that is sending them in once a year to get tuned up. We use Atkins here, try to stay as local as we can. and then purchasing helmets and uniforms for new medics. And then last year, they gave us the funds for the anti-idle system that I'll talk about on that new ambulance. We assigned funds for the WISC funds. So there's two funds that actually sit in that investment account. The first one is the post-retirement healthcare fund. So as contractually, when our employees leave, what they have remaining in the balance in their sick time is actually all of it is paid out into a post-retirement healthcare fund. So those are funds that set about as employees retire, and I want to call it an unpredictable retirement. Those are funds that we would use to pay into the employees' post-retirement healthcare fund. The other part of that is actually labor contract negotiations. So we set aside funds every year so that every year during a contract year, we aren't operationally planning what it takes to use attorney's fees for contract negotiations. Previously, even 2 months ago, we had those separated out. One of them was our labor attorney fund. The other one was post-retirement healthcare. As we kind of saw what happened with our investments, the overall money market, so that post-retirement healthcare was giving us a little bit, like $5, $8, $16 in returns. That CD we used for our labor contract, we got a really significantly better interest rate on it. I reached out to our representative at WISC and said, what can we do to get a better return on both of these things? So as you see there, and I mentioned this to the commission last month, we took all of those funds and put them together. So Michelle is actually tracking $24,000 and everything else that we use for post-retirement healthcare. We put them into two different CDs. One of them is a CD that will mature every year because I don't know when employees are going to retire. So every year we are able to access those funds, right? If Jeff decides he wants to retire next year, I will need to go pull some of those funds and I can get that on a yearly basis. Best guess that it would support a couple employees retiring, and versus every 2 years, we're going to get a better rate of return. So we have another chunk of that money in that 2-year investment account. So that is why you see it looking, previous month, previous year, it all changed last month. But you can see in the bottom line, that total assigned fund, the first month that we did that, it got about another $160 in investment return on the investment. So already that has started to pay off. And that fills in up above. Those are the current financials. Is there any questions before I kind of move on to the next step? Those I will keep driving on. Thank you for listening. Normally there's more zazz and flair about this. Beyond that, I'd like to recognize with our commission members, I recognize every month the employee's length of service. So we have Chance, the big performers here. Chance has actually been here since an explorer. So he was an explorer, he was a volunteer as an LTE, and now he's one of our full-timers. He's been here for 26 years. Other big ones, Ross has been here for 14 years, Greg for 11, and then we hired a lot of people, Jeremy and the rest of those LTEs, who've all been here for about 2 to 3 years. I was waiting for Scott to yell at me. I tried to take the animation off. I know there's animation is a no-no in Zoom meetings. I couldn't get the slide to not do it. As far as our length of service years, so in 2021, so this is over the course of 2021, what do we have for length of service? So this is actually my 20th year. I started at Fitrona in January 2nd of 2001. So I hit 20 years this year. Gary started 6 months after me, but he likes to remind me that I left for a couple of years and went to a part-time status and came back. So he does like to remind me he actually really has more time than me. But we both started the same year, so we both hit 20 years. Brandon Ryan, we're going to recognize him for 10. Casey Schmidt as an LTE for 5 years. Normally in the past, we have actually about a year ago, 2 years ago, started giving nameplates that said recognition for the intervals of the 5 years of service. So a huge shout out to those employees who've given quite a bit of time here at Fitrona. That is what I have essentially for my chief's report. Let me kind of wrap up with the where we're going stuff here, and then I'll let Dr. Mansera kind of take over and talk about some of his stuff with our cardiac arrest data. So this is what I like to do. Where's Fitch-Rona going? Looks like the whole slide filled in there. Looking back historically, right, Fitrona became a service in September of 1977. So we have our first solid year in 1978. and projecting out through 2039. You see how steep that curve is there. Big moments in history with Fitrona. 2001 is when we moved to full-time staffing from that volunteer, that reliance on volunteers. Shortly thereafter, we put that second ambulance in service part-time. It quickly grew into second ambulance full-time. It met the capacity that Fitch-Rona needed for many, many years till 2019. In 2019 is when we actually hit that third ambulance. So just a couple of years ago, and that was 3,443 calls, right? Roughly 1,000 to 1,500 calls per ambulance is capacity before we start missing calls. If you're dialed in last year and you saw, so if we continue on that trend of 3 to 5%, adding in that next year, October of 2022, the town of Madison will become part of our service area. That will add somewhere between 350 or more calls to our annual call volume. That we saw what would have happened. Now, based on a 20% growth, if this is sustained over the course of time, initially 2025, we would have hit 4,500 calls, right? That's about the time we need to start thinking about a fourth ambulance. If this 20% growth rate continues on past this year, we will hit 4,500 calls in 2 years. That's when, so I'm going to put it out there as far as the 2023, 2025, at some point in the next 4 to 5 years, we'll be needing to expand. Again, probably not a 24-hour truck, but it's some sort of additional staff. As that continues to grow 3 to 5% after that, all of these get bumped ahead. We hit 5,500 calls in just 8 years from now. We're at over 5,000 calls in 9 years. That is a fifth ambulance. So I always like to share that every year just to kind of keep that on the radar and on the horizon as our municipalities continue to grow. Right, the growth is awesome between all of our municipalities, but I know as we add at least 4 more senior living centers in the next couple of years, that is all growth. So keeping it on the horizon, where are we going? We're going to continue to expand. We're going to continue to grow and do what we need to do. What does that mean? Target dates for me, right? 2025 means an ambulance number 4. I don't know how we staff that. I got some ideas. Again, I don't think it needs to be a 24-hour truck, but it kind of remains to be seen what's going to happen in our next few years here. We need ambulance number 4. So we'll come up with some staffing options for that. As we start doing that as well, it is still just Jeff and I down here managing at least 21 employees, 16 part-time employees. As we add more staff, we're going to need more people to assist with that. As mentioned from that graph, in 2030, so just 9 years from now, ambulance number 5. That's where we're moving as far as growth and staffing models. Other things just to bring up, as I mentioned, we brought up, we got transport ventilators. We are the only, at least 911 service in Dane County utilizing transport ventilators. It's been actually a pretty good, Jeff would have to tell you, I was going to pull some numbers. It is a handful of times a month. It is a more consistent ventilation. It actually can prevent a lot of further injury to patients. Other options that are out there for us as we grow into the future is one of those is point of care lab testing. So they make portable testing. We have fairly short transport times. Our average transport times are somewhere about 8 minutes. But the farther out we get, the longer those transport times are. We can do blood tests at a patient's side. So I am the far corner of Verona, which is or down at Oak Hill, which is, we're talking 15 to 20 minute transport times. Patients who are having cardiac issues, who maybe their 12 lead looks good or looks okay, there's nothing remarkable on it, but we can do a drop of blood and pull it in and say, though their EKG looks fine, we pulled their lab test back and says, there's an indication here that they're having some sort of cardiac event. We can actually alert cardiac cath labs sooner. So there's actually a lot of research and deployment of point of care testing. All this costs money. So these are some of the things looking forward to as far as expanding care. Other option that's out there, a handful of larger services doing it is pre-hospital ultrasound. Again, our transport times are fairly short. So we got to weigh that transport time with the amount of time we're sitting on scene to look at things. But as far as trauma care, there's potential out there for alerting trauma teams based on doing a trauma assessment. Right? I can only look at the outside of somebody in the back of my ambulance, but I can grab an ultrasound and look and say there's some bleeding in the belly, there's some bleeding in the heart. Maybe we need to alert a trauma team, and that trauma team is now alerted 10 to 15 minutes sooner than they normally would have been based on some ultrasound. So again, I don't want to call them pipe dreams, but they're dreams. They are a place that I think that we as a service, we have a phenomenal staff who has some pretty good buy-in to some training, into some advancement. We have opportunities from those local businesses to provide us with fundings that this wouldn't cause an additional funding to our taxpayers. Some ideas that we can look at for the future as we continue to grow.
That's exciting, Patrick. As a person who receives a lot of the patients from EMS, having a lot of this stuff done, or at least know about a lot of this before they get to us, is awesome.
There's a lot of great stuff being done with both of these things. Again, weigh in the cost of all of this stuff. With the, if it's a 5-minute transport time, I don't want to be I want to be sitting on scene doing it, but absolutely. So that's good. That's great to hear. And I know our staff can get excited about some of these things. Thank you, Sue. That is what I have for as far as a chief's report, other than I didn't get Dr. Mancera on the agenda. So I think I can slip him in legally on the agenda under chief's report. If you've got some stuff to share, I don't know, Doctor, if you've got a slide deck you want to show.
I do. I'm going to try to share my screen here.
Okay. I will try to unshare.
All right, let me see. Here we go. Okay, you guys should. All right, you guys should be able to see my screen now, hopefully. So Mike Mancera, I have the honor of serving as the medical director for Fitch-Rona EMS. So I work alongside Chief Anderson, Deputy Chief Dostalek, get to work alongside the EMS providers as well. So good seeing Kyle here a little bit earlier presenting as well. So I thought I would use this time to highlight just a little bit in terms of patient care and some of the things that Fitch-Rona as a service can be proud of, and that we collectively can be proud of. I think there's many examples of that. This is just one of the many examples. So we're going to focus on cardiac arrest. A little bit of my background. So I serve as an emergency room physician at UW. I am also the EMS medical director for Fitch-Rona. So much like, Fitch-Rona participates in what we call the ALS Consortium for Medical Direction. So much like you guys are a district, Fitch-Rona has chosen to participate in kind of collective medical direction. So partnering with some of the other neighbors as far as EMS services to get shared protocols, to get some collective shared training opportunities, and kind of shared medical direction. So I serve as the point and primary medical director for Fitch-Rona, and have been honored to do that for the past several years. A great service to work with. I think you guys can be proud of that. We're going to specifically focus on just cardiac arrest for this example, because I think, we spent a lot of time talking about the operations, and I think this then ties it into patient care and clinical outcomes. This is the medical part that I'm most interested in. Obviously, all the finances and the operations and the logistics and the personnel are what make this happen. But to me, this kind of hopefully highlights why all of those things are so important. So this is a snapshot. If you look at Dane County as a whole, this is the number of cardiac arrests in the county. So that top graph is the total number of cardiac arrests throughout the entire county. You can see it broken down by year. You can see that number rapidly increasing. So just like Chief Anderson was showing you, the number of call volumes has also been going up. The number of cardiac arrests has also been increasing, and at a fairly steady rate over the past couple of years, like you can see. You can compare that to the national trend, and that's very much in line with what the national trends are. So very much consistent with what we're seeing regionally, with what we're seeing nationally. Fitrona, as well as the county, we're actually one of the first places in the state to participate in what we call the CARES registry. So we've actually got really good a data registry for cardiac arrest care from the pre-hospital setting. So all of our EMS care is documented, and all that data is then stored. This registry then marries that up with the outcome data. So how did these patients do in the hospital? Were they able to get discharged home? What was their neurologic status when they were discharged home? And it really gives us that full picture of what was the total outcome, and what did that patient care look like. The good news is I know there's a lot of colors on here. I didn't intentionally make this Packers colors, but hey, some of you guys might be Packers fans, is my guess. So if you look at the Fitch-Rona survival rates, two numbers there. We'll look at these top numbers first. So our survival rate for a very specific subset of those patients So these are patients who have had a cardiac arrest, so they've lost pulses, their heart's not beating. We are most focused on the patients who this was a witnessed event. So this isn't a patient who's been, unresponsive or down for 6 hours and is found by a family member. This is someone who has a witnessed event and then has an intervenable rhythm. And for the not medical people, that means something that we can actually put the pads on and shock. These are the patients that actually have their highest survival rate and that we can actually make a difference. And this is the group that we kind of collectively use as kind of our example to universally talk about what the survival rates look like. So this lets us talk about those benchmarks that we've talked about and lets us compare apples to apples when we compare our survival rates to the region, to the county, to the state, and to national. These are all the same subset of patients that we're talking about. So it kind of lets us give that even comparison. The good news is, as you can see, so of that subgroup of patients, we had a 50% survival rate, which is amazing, and I think you guys can be very proud of that. You can see that compared to the national average of approaching 29%, approaching 30%, significantly higher than that. The next group down there, these are patients that got bystander CPR, and about half of the patients in this group actually got bystander CPR, meaning did someone start CPR and chest compression and start pressing on the chest even before EMS got there. That survival rate actually didn't change, but significantly of note is significantly still higher than the overall national averages. So overall, you can be very proud that your citizens are getting excellent, high quality care. We can arguably say this is what we train for. This is the patients that we treat every call like it's a cardiac arrest, but these are the ones that matter. These are the ones that, life or death situation, time matters, and then obviously the outcome matters. So the good news is we are seeing very good outcomes here at the Fitrona service. We have note on this graph, and it gets cut off on my screen, but you can see that compared even, so we see the national average, and then we see the Wisconsin state average there, and it's cut off on my screen. I think it was like 42%. So even performing better than overall the whole state of Wisconsin. So it gives us good benchmarks to compare ourselves to, how are we doing? And we'll see some fluctuations in this number, but it gives us that good trend. And the good news is that our trend has been upward and we've consistently performed very well. So really good patient care, good patient outcomes, which is obviously what we care about. So proud to say we're doing better than both the state as well as the national averages as far as our cardiac arrest outcomes, and really putting the emphasis and focus on kind of our continued training efforts, equipment. So Chief Anderson mentioned kind of some of the Lucas device, which is the mechanical chest compression device. It presses so that the providers you don't have to be unbuckled, standing in the back of a moving ambulance. Ventilators, which allows us to give accurate ventilations at an appropriate rate and an appropriate volume. All those things become crucially important, and those types of tools really do help us. But more importantly, providing really good quality assurance, providing really high quality training, and really having a devoted, invested staff, which is what you guys have. You've got high quality leadership with dedicated personnel who consistently are engaged in training, consistently engaged in patient care, and really do care about the service that they're providing. And hopefully this kind of helps demonstrate that. One of the other things that, the county as a whole, but Fitrona also participates in is Pulse Point. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this or want to participate, if you know CPR and want to volunteer to do CPR to a neighbor or a fellow citizen in need, you can download this app to your smartphone if you so choose, completely voluntary. And if you want more information about that, we're happy to provide that, but certainly something that we certainly promote within the community. So hopefully you guys have had that message received as well. Other than that, so that's kind of my brief update. We do provide other quality improvement endeavors that the chiefs are heavily involved with. We do kind of unique trainings. This week, we actually were doing a cadaver lab with our training center. So some of our providers got the opportunity to actually do real life training on cadavers and tissue, which is super helpful. We continue to emphasize doing kind of high quality training and the run reviews like Chief Anderson was talking about. With that, I'll thank you. I'm happy to take any questions or talk about anything further, but I'll try to keep it brief. And I thank you for your time. And thank you, Chief, for letting me talk a little bit.
Thank you, Dr. Mancera. Any questions? We try to keep them as involved as possible, even if it's just coming up to the station and hanging out with staff. It's kind of that best that water cooler quality improvement, that a lot of that best training and best conversations happen when you're just hanging out versus actually that organized training. Segueing onto his Dr. Mancera's results here, it's a great opportunity now for me to do the shout outs for our partners as well. Dane County has a phenomenal 911 system. If you've ever had to call them before, the dispatchers and the call takers we have here in Dane County are just second to none. Do a phenomenal job with this as well, staying calm and encouraging bystander CPR, as well as both of our police departments in Fitchburg and Verona, our Dane County Sheriff's Department that covers the town of Verona, and the fire departments we work with. They all are an integral part of these survival rates. It's not just us, it's all of us working together as a team to make this happen. So thank you.
Okay, guess we'll move on. Excellent presentations. Thank you, Doctor, and thank you, Chief. Anybody have any other questions, comments? Anything else you want to add, Chief?
Not to my chief's report. Last thing I'll do is I'll try to keep it brief because I know everybody has seen, well, most people have seen the budget at some point. So I can just keep driving on with a brief review of what we're doing as far as a budget wise, and
okay,
get you going, enjoying the rest of your night. So the two parts of here, if you reminder for the intergovernment, we changed our intergovernmental agreement this year. The voting on the budget was largely symbolic. It's been written into that intergovernmental agreement since 1978 that our budget as a district was still subject to the normal municipalities budget process. So even though we voted on our budgets here annually, it didn't really matter. It had to go through your own process as well. So when we updated the intergovernmental agreement, we got rid of that because it's going to go through your normal budget process as well. So what I really just want to do is kind of continue on with that state of the state. And for the city council members who don't normally get to see what happens behind the scenes at Fitrona, one is that sell us, sell our medics, reinforce that we're doing a phenomenal job, and this is what we're doing. So our capital improvement projects for the future, as I mentioned, we have 5 ambulances. Braun is the ambulance company that all of our ambulances are now come from Braun. It's one of a handful of manufacturers in the United States. The plus side of staying with the same manufacturer each time is if I buy one door lock, it works on all of our ambulances. So things that take me out of service are door locks, sirens, the little kind of things I have to put a truck on the road. I have a little stash in the corner of all of these little things. And as opposed to waiting, as everybody is probably feeling those supply chain challenges over the last year or so that can continue to get worse, we keep a little stash here and we're able to put trucks back on the roads. This year is the first year we switched to we did get a 2021 ambulance, as you can see from that. We did upgrade to the F550 chassis. Probably looking back, they're big trucks. Please stop by anytime and take a look at them. They are big trucks, but there's a lot of space, especially for a paramedic level service. We can do a lot of things in the back of those trucks. They're big trucks to allow us to do the space and carry the equipment we need to carry. We were probably getting pretty close, if not exceeding the capacity of those trucks. So this is the first year we upgraded to that larger chassis. We will continue to do that moving forward. As I mentioned, because we have 5 trucks, we buy a new truck every 2 years. So the first thing people think of, you buy a new truck every 2 years, wow. We keep that truck for 10 years. So especially with 3 stations. So it runs as a frontline truck for 6 years. It spends its last 2 years then its last 4 years in that reserve status. We replace it after 10 years. Sticker price on that, roughly $370,000. That includes the truck and almost everything inside of it. So as opposed to trying to do these smaller capital purchases of replacing cots and replacing cardiac monitors and replacing computers and radios, etc., we replace everything inside of that ambulance about every 10 years. So that saves us having to do a bunch of little capital improvements. We just keep it as long as we can for those 10 years. With the addition, as I had mentioned earlier, with some funds from Epic, that's what we asked for Epic for last year for the purchase of this year's truck. Epic gave us some funds as we try to go green and stay with the goal of all of our municipalities is to create a better environment. Epic gave us funds. We did a little bit of research and we put anti-idle technology on our truck that we purchased this year. I did put the link on there if you want to dig into it a little bit deeper. The product we chose was Stealth Power. They actually work with New Orleans and New York and Austin, Texas. So some very larger services. So it's not brand new technology. We put it on our ambulance. I'll move one slide ahead and we'll come back. This is what it looks like. It's actually in that driver's side compartment. Even though we have these gigantic ambulances, real estate is precious. We just have a lot of stuff that we carry for a handful of those little times we need it, but we need it. So it was actually a really big design deal to take up this much real estate on an ambulance to make this ambulance go green. This is what it looks like. This is actually ambulance 46. So it's run out of station number 2 in Fitchburg. What it does is it's not a hybrid vehicle. The truck itself is still the truck itself. So it doesn't do anything with the truck. What this does is it shuts the truck off. One of the biggest challenges with our ambulances, right, is that patient compartment. So by shutting a truck off, most of the time we still need the back of that to work in. What this does is actually it's time. So after 5 minutes, it actually shuts the truck off, and the entire patient care compartment is then powered by this little bank of batteries here. So the air conditioning works, the heating works, all the lights, the suction units, the radios, the computers, everything that is plugged in continues to work. It will run off of this bank of batteries until one of a couple things happen. One, that they're getting ready to go, they put their foot on the brake and the truck will start back up. Other thing is, as you can see all the electronics in here, if it powers down enough on that load of batteries, if it's 100 degrees outside, the air conditioner has to work pretty hard. It kicks on much sooner than if it's 60 degrees outside. The air conditioner doesn't have to work as hard to cool the back of the ambulance. We haven't had to try it in the heat side of things yet. I'm sure it'll be very similar. But that's what that looks like. So that was an addition here. So far, I haven't heard, the only thing I've heard from staff is that it's just weird to come back out and your ambulance is shut off. Still making some noise, but it's not actually running. But over the couple months we've had it here, seems to be working okay. Either that or nobody's told me anything. Just a little bit of perspective. So we don't stage, like unlike those larger municipalities who go pick up their ambulance in the morning and go sit at the corner of Green Fish Hatchery Road and wait for calls. We don't do that. We sit in stations because that's what our district area is. So we're probably not going to see a huge fuel savings on that because our vehicles aren't idling and running for 24 hours. We're going to see essentially the greenhouse gases or the emissions be reduced. Doing just some quick calculations of ambulance number. It said it's an ambulance 46, which is in the middle, runs the most amount of calls. So if we take our averages, the amount of calls that ambulance does, our average call sits there for 15 minutes, shuts off after 5 minutes. So we take saving 10 minutes on every call that ambulance does. Roughly about every month, we save about 23 hours of idling time. Add that up over the course of the year, and that actually does start to add up. So one little part that we're able to do to help kind of reduce greenhouse gases as we expand my intent is to continue to put this on all of our future ambulances, which in the big picture will start to add up as far as reducing idle time. We'll ultimately probably reduce a little bit of fuel savings and wear and tear as well. So that's a little bit about the Untitled technology. You can find out more if you go to the website. Now, one of the proposals will be as we search forward or as move forward, and this was actually put into our CIP project this year. When we expand to that 4th ambulance, and it's entirely possible this will need to happen sooner, we will need to keep 6 ambulances because we'll be putting a 4th one on the street. We are busy enough. We need 2 reserve ambulances. Unfortunately, it actually happens fairly frequently, more than I would like it to happen when an ambulance goes down. Because if I lose a siren, I can't use that ambulance. So I'm moving into another one. Say that it never fails out at the same time that I need an oil change, a tire rotation, or that something leaks or breaks or spills all over the floor. So 2 ambulances truly is the reserve that we need. So we'll have to be expanding to a fleet of 6, at least in 2025. I would actually entertain that may actually need to happen 2 years sooner in 2023, kind of based on what our volume looks like. That will extend the life of an ambulance for a frontline ambulance to 8 years and a reserve ambulance for 4 years. So though we'll still buy them every 2 years, we'll have to extend the life of that to 12 years. I think that really remains to be seen about the sustainability of that as we start putting more miles on them and keeping them longer. But right now we got a plan for moving forward. That would actually be Medic 41. If anybody does the math or noticed in there, if you noticed that we actually skipped a number, Brooklyn is rescue 42, and they're not going to give me that number regardless of how much I have offered to pay for that or do that, do that for them. It is a bunch of community ownership, and that number has been Brooklyn 42, just like we've had Fitrona Ambulance 44 has been that way since 1977. It's been Brooklyn 42 since 1977, and they're not going to give it to me. So we will actually have 41, 43 through 47.
Patrick, one quick question on that.
Yeah.
When we added the third ambulance, did we see a reduction in miles per ambulance, or have we grown so much that it ends up being about the same anyway? I'm just curious on, as we add more, ambulances, do we reduce wear and tear a little bit anyway? Or maybe you haven't looked at that.
So we do actually started keeping about 3 years ago. We actually started keeping track of true mileage. The mileage did go down a little bit, but oddly enough, with the increase in volume, it really wasn't as much as I kind of thought it would be. Right. As we sold our ambulance this year that had just under 100,000 miles on it, I currently have 3 ambulances with over 100,000 miles on them. So we are still putting the miles on them. One of the challenges with 43 is its location is we are now more frequently going into the town of Dunn. We are going into Oregon. We are going into Stoughton. We are going into Monona. With the loss of the town of Madison, we're actually now a closer ambulances to a lot more places. So our mileage, I think, has started to increase. It is something we absolutely look at because we kind of factored that, saying our call volume is going to go up, but we're going to split it evenly between 3 ambulances. It really hasn't happened yet. There may be a day we need to kind of start shuffling them around to even that mileage out, but I think right now it's actually kind of taking care of itself. Right? Verona has fewer calls, but they drive farther. Interesting. It's an insight though. Other capital improvement project we have is our support vehicles. So we got our second car in 2020. So now we have 2. Frequently, Jeff and I find us going ourselves in opposite directions. So though we share, we each do have our own car. It doesn't have our name on it, so it's not tagged. But we kind of have self-identified who gets what. Jeff doesn't like the newer one, I like the bigger, older one. But we have it there. We have they're currently on a 15-year replacement program. It's a lot of short distance miles. So I'm pretty sure my car drives about the same 9 miles between here and Meritor Hospital, and station number 3 is about the same 9 miles it gets on it all of the time. So they don't get a high mileage, it's just the wear and tear on them. So we're gonna kind of keep an eye on that oldest car that is the 2010. It's entirely possible when it comes for replacement in 2025, we may actually just tack another 5 years on and keep them for 20 years. We'll see what happens over the next couple of years and kind of expand that CAP process, try to save a little bit of money if we can truly get that many years out of those cars. But those are the 2 really only big projects we have for CIP. We replace everything in an ambulance, and we replace our 2 response vehicles. Questions on CIP stuff? And that's our fleet. So last thing I'll get into is the operational budget. A lot of these things you have seen as far as finance committees, and our commission has seen this a couple of times since we presented it. So here's the 2022 operational budget, so I can explain it to you, and you can ask me the questions as it came to you, and kind of just that one big number. So our fee schedule, this is something we actually just met on tonight as far as an EMS commission goes. Our current fee schedule is we charge $1,100 for a resident, $1,200 for a non-resident. We have a no transport fee of $150. That charge is only incurred if we do an assessment or provide care and don't transport somebody. We pull up to a vehicle, somebody says, I didn't call you, don't touch me, don't look at me. We keep on driving. Those do not incur fees. In general, lift assists do not incur fees. It's kind of one of our jobs is to go out. I fell out of bed, we help them back into a bed. At assisted living centers, we help out to some extent. I don't want to call it abuse, but if we see a repeated pattern of residents or homes, we do our best to get them care, kind of redirect them of if we are becoming the person to pick people up and get them back in bed, they need to do something to keep them safe, and they need a better support structure. So we do our best to kind of redirect them and get them the care they need. Those potentially can generate bills if it becomes, I want to call it abuse. but we use it kind of as a pressuring system, like you need to get more help, right? The 911 system is not a primary care use. The supplies, they vary based on the cost of supplies, 50 cents versus whatever it costs us for glucagon these days. Mileage is $22 per loaded mile. And then last year we increased our standby fee to about $130 for an ambulance. As I fit that into the budget process, this is before our current trend continued. So I plan on call volume increasing 3 to 5% every year. I use the 3%. It's because historically what we've been using. So when I estimated run income for next year, we used 3,700 calls. We're going to exceed that by probably about 400 calls already this year. But the budget process is in. Our current recovery rate is about 43%. Now that sounds really low, but that 43% includes the mandatory write-offs we take for government funding. So though I can bill whatever I want, I can put out a $1,500 bill to Medicare. Medicare will reimburse us $333, and I have to write off the rest. So that is so roughly 43% of that, or 50% of that, we're never going to see, because that was our Medicare medical assistance, workers' comp kind of claims that we are contractually obligated to write off. And then we still have that handful of people who don't pay, the un or underinsured or patients we don't have information on. So 43% is kind of what we work off of when we determine what that run fee schedule is. We put pull all those things in there, and statistically, historically, what we have charged, and this is how I determine what run income is. Now, this is the story that I have shared way back in March when I determined what the problem was. And so here's, you're going to see that first line item, right? So the 2021 budget for this year, right, estimated at about $1.7 million in run income. If you look at what the 2022 budget is, and you'll see it's $1.5 million, the question is going to be, Patrick, how is there a $218,000 difference? Because run income has always gone up. Why is it going down? In a nutshell, what it is Patrick screwed up. So in about 2018, in preparation for the 2019 budget, we were putting that third ambulance in place. I went and looked at this formula and said, we have a third ambulance coming in place. How does that change run income, right? Are we going to see a difference in transports and no transports and volume? What are we going to see? So I kind of did a best guess and adapted the run income to say, this is what I think we're going to see in 2019. As you're probably aware, unless you're a newer member, that start date for that third ambulance was very much a moving target. Budgets are due in June. The budget for 2019 for 2020 and the following year was submitted before that third ambulance even started. So in an effort not to make one more variable in that plan, kept the same formula for 2020. So when that ambulance started in August and we had 3 ambulances in the streets, hopefully that was going to make up for that progress and kind of what that estimated run income was going to be. And then COVID hit. COVID actually did change our makeup of calls. We actually did have an increase in our no transports because we tried to keep people out of hospitals. But still, so the change I made in the formula plus a little bit of a makeup overestimated what run income should have been in 2020. Same problem happened in 2021, right? We've got COVID. I still don't really have only about 6 or 8 months worth of that third ambulance in place. So making one more variable, I left the formula the same for 2021. So 2-3 years in a row, I put that formula in there. Recognizing in 2020, even though with COVID, we see that run income wasn't meeting what I had anticipated it to be. Combining that with, we have an external audit every year. So auditors looked and said in 2020, in this year, looked last year and said, you tapped into your reserves, Patrick, pretty significantly more than you probably should have. Went back to look and this said and said, I probably shouldn't have touched that formula. Right? Went back and looked 3 years, said, if I leave it and our breakdown is the same versus no transports and transport, correcting that formula actually corrected what that anticipated run income. I was way overestimating run income for the last 2 years. So it is corrected now to what it should be. Formula is good. I actually went back and tested it over the last 3 years and normalizing it to what actually occurred to actual dollars in. It was correct. So that formula is good now. Unfortunately, to make up for it this year, we see a significant drop in run income. And I should say a drop in estimated run income. Run income does continue to go up. but this had to fix it. So this was one of the causes when I dropped run income by 12% because my error a few years ago. There's an impact on what it's going to be as far as the municipalities needed to make up that difference. I'm going to talk about that at the very end of it because there's another component in there as that influences what I'm asking you for. But that is where that feeds into our budget. When we take our operational budget, how much it's going to cost to run Fitrona, I determine what run income is going to be. We take that out of there, and then the municipalities have to pay for the rest. A couple other sources of income that we have here. We do some CPR classes. We teach CPR. It's been a while now, but we teach CPR. And then the contracted events. So when we go to the Alliant Energy Center, we charge them for us to be there. Those events are charged at a rate that covers 100% of the cost of our staff being there. So there is zero taxpayer dollars used to support the Derby Derby Run, the Alliant Energy Center, and other events, because those ambulances are dedicated to those events and the taxpayers can't access those. So that's why we put contracted events in there, because those wages still come out of the wage line, but they're reimbursed by those contracted events. This explains to you, this is another way of just looking as I talk to you about my error in budgeting. So if we look at what the call volume was anticipated to be versus what the projected budget was versus those dollars that actually came in, you can see in 2019 where I messed that number up. Way overestimated run income in 2019. In 2020, the same thing is going to happen in 2021. So that is why that number is corrected back to something that is much more, that is normal where it should have been. As far as expenses go, wages and benefits. So wages, our medics are part of Local 311. So wages and benefits are all contractual. So there it is. You're going to see those changes there. The biggest difference to point out is the sick time over cap. So a couple of years ago, on their last contract, we did have people, there's a cap to their sick time, 1,296 hours. We had a handful of people who were over that. With that last contract, we actually, the benefit of anybody who was at capacity with their sick time, they are actually paid out half of that sick time into a post-retirement healthcare while they're still working here. So we had a handful of people who were already over that as part of the contract to pay them back down to their 1,296. That was paid out over the course of 3 years. This year is the last year that payment is made, bringing them all back down to 1,296. So that is why you see such a reduction in sick time over cap. We don't have to pay, we don't have to pay that balance out down this year. Leaving us, as far as salaries and wages go, an increase of about 3.2%. We still do not have our health insurance rates. Those will come because we're a smaller entity. We get them last over all those larger municipalities. We anticipate historically has always been an 8% in healthcare and health and a 4% in dental. Usually between the two of them, it's pretty spot on. Other expenses, I just want to point out the big expenses we have for this year. As far as repair and replacement costs, as we have an aging fleet, as those supply challenges we have been facing. The example I give is we had a vehicle go down with a bad fuel injector. That vehicle sat at Kaiser for 2 months waiting for a fuel injector. So we're seeing problems with supply chains everywhere. That's been impacting our repair and replacement parts. Just one, getting them, and two, the cost of them continues to skyrocket. So we up that line as well. The other one is the medical supplies. The story, I know many people have heard it. The same box of gloves that 2 years ago I bought a box of gloves for $9.50. That box of glove today lists for $43. So our medical supplies, which we have overspent the last 2 years anyway, upped that by about 23%. Now we're not paying $43 for them. We are getting them at a lower price than that, but we're still paying for that same box of gloves is $33 for us. And we're still actually shopping around and trying to find. We still have a different supplier. They're not nearly the quality, so I apologize to my staff every day for buying them gloves that are a little less quality than they're used to. But it's the difference between $15 and $30 for a box of gloves. So we're trying to find the happy medium of continuing to get them what they need, but knowing that I believe as of this month, I have spent our medical supply item for the year, and we still have 2.5 months to go. So that was a pretty significant increase for next year to bring that up to what it needs to be, and we will still meet that for next year. right, the big minus 100% there. We actually got rid of a $600 line item because we used to rent a printer. We don't rent it anymore. We own it. So that reduced it a little bit. We tried to find every little spot we could between myself and Jeff and Michelle to reduce this, knowing the impact of my budget screw up from a couple years ago was going to make a pretty significant impact on the municipalities. So I'm trying to reduce any operational expense we could. So you'll see the line item there. Take it back one up. The computer support went down for $6,000. Every year, it is on a 5-year replacement to replace 3 computers at the workstations between our 3 stations. The admin ones for myself, Jeff, and Michelle, and then the tablets there and the computers. Every 5 years, the plan is to replace those. In an effort to try to keep that number down, we're going to forgo all three workstations at the computers that the staff uses have all been replaced in the last 3 years. So this would be the year to replace the ones for myself and Jeff and Michelle. We're going to forgo that for a year and try to save a little bit of funding. I think we can weather that. So we'll cut a little bit out there. When I get down here, next year is going to be, as I mentioned, we have an external audit every year. I guess sort of, I'm not using the right terms. Every 3 years we have an audit. In years 1 and year 2, we have a review. So essentially, my understanding, it's the same thing. They just, I want to say it's the same thing. They just charge us more. That's not entirely the case. They come in and they look and make sure that it's Johnson and Block. They come in and make sure that our accounting practices are good. Again, they're the ones that kind of red flag this. You have a problem with your run income. Next year is the full audit, which they dig a little bit deeper, is my understanding, is they start to look more for when I buy something. Previously, they just looked that you bought something and I sold it. Next year is the year they say, show me the receipt that says that Patrick's not buying gloves and putting them in the back of his truck and selling them down at Farm and Fleet. So next year, that's why the account line went up a little bit next year, because we have to pay more for that audit. Legal fees is unchanged. Property insurance, this is actually just finally catching up for us moving into that 3rd station in 2019, in 2020, 21. That's just finally catching up to, we own more stuff now because we have a 3rd station, so we up that. You'll see the billing service line go down. Our billing service charges us, they keep 6% of what they bill for us. So that is their incentive to bill. The more they bill, the more they get. Because run income will go down, the billing service fee line will also go down. All those expenses together between our wages and salaries, and then the operational expenses down below, is a 3.3% increase in our budget for next year. How does that fit into equalized value? So again, I said I take that run income. Let me back up one line. 2022 operating budget, $3.3 million. So what we do is we take and subtract what I estimate run income to be. The rest of it is based to the municipalities based on equalized valuation. Now the other problem, and I will claim, right, I screwed up the first part. The state of Wisconsin screwed up the second part. The state of Wisconsin Department of Administration screwed up the equalized value of the city of Verona last year to the extent of about $100 million. To make up for that mistake from last year, to give them the credit for what they overcharged them last year, and then to make life correct this year, it ended up being about $200 million. So the equalized value, as far as everybody went, is Fitchburg had some phenomenal growth at 11%. I believe the town of Verona went up about 6%. Because of the equalized value screw up, the city of Verona actually went down 2%. So when you plug those numbers in there, that's that 53, 41, and 5% of all of equalized the municipalities based on equalized value. Historically, it's been 50, 45, 5. So if we look at all those different changes and we look at all those the breakdown, that's what you'll see. That number in yellow is what I am asking the municipalities for this year. A pretty significant increase. If you look down at the bottom, that very last line on the sheet, that is a 30% increase for the city of Fitchburg, a 15% increase for the city of Verona, and about a 24% increase for the town of Verona. So my error, the state's error, that is what that did to our budget for this year. So I'm going to own that mistake and apologize. We caught it, we fixed it. This budget now moving forward, you shouldn't see these huge increases until we start adding staff in the future. This is now where we should have been over the last 2 to 3 years. Unfortunately, we just had to catch up for it in 1 year. Big picture stuff of a $3.3 million budget, you're still only paying those small amounts. So it's still a really efficient system. the benefits of Kyle had talked about opening, in his opening remarks from the staff. The district is still actually a very economical system to do. That cost sharing, that resource sharing, for everyone to do this on their own, you're looking at least double what you're paying there, and you still need 3 ambulances. So you still need the resources that you have. Is there any questions on the equalized value? Otherwise, that is actually what I have for as far as the budget presentation. So any questions on my screw up, how we, to prevent, I guess I'll throw the little in there, recognizing my error in the future. We have kind of come up with a backup system. When Mayor Diaz, when I did the finance committee presentation to the city of Verona, works as a processor and said, a good idea in the future, which we will adopt. Anytime you change formulas, anytime you change a process, somebody else needs to look at it. So we've kind of adopted this message and this practice in the future. It says, at any time Patrick thinks he knows more than the spreadsheet does, he needs to call over Jeff and Michelle and say, hey, does this jive? We're also taking a look at run income in a completely different manner and actually looking at real dollars in and real dollars out and making sure that between those two numbers, they fit. So again, any changes in the future, right? Learning from our mistakes, moving forward and making sure that this doesn't happen again. We're going to make sure any changes in the future are double checked, as well as bouncing ideas off of Misty up in the city of Fitchburg and Brian here in the city of Verona, who have been phenomenal partners to work with, right? Have a much more solid finance background than I have, and have worked with them in the past. I was just able to explain, right? It made sense to me at the time why it was doing what it was doing, made sense to them, right? We'll catch it in the future. So I guess I'll take this give you this any opportunity. Are there any questions about the budget? That's what I've got. Can answer questions for anyone. I like silence.
Well, Patrick, I just want to say, I know that ate you up a lot, and we appreciate what you've done in trying to correct it and communicate that to the staff as much as we can. So thanks for that.
Any other questions, comments? If not, excellent presentation, Patrick. Thank you.
Still didn't beat Brian's time, I think. I tried to keep it in less than an hour, but it was a little more complicated this year. So I do appreciate all the council members and the town supervisors who join us. You don't never think about the EMS service until you got a call for an ambulance, and then you hope that they show up. So it's a unique process. It is a unique operation we have here. If you have any questions, I would offer you that every year feel free to come do a ride along. Probably not COVID time, still probably not a really great time to do it, but 6 months to a year from now, please stop by the stations, get a tour. We'll absolutely let you ride along and kind of sit back and truly watch what our staff does. It takes special people to do what we do.
This is Mark with the town of Verona. I just want to say that the presentation tonight was excellent. I really appreciated your service. On behalf of the town, we want to thank you for all you do. Your dedication is inspirational, and thanks much for all your preparation for tonight's presentation.
Thank you.
I guess, any other comments? If not, thanks everyone for participation, and I guess we will adjourn if there's a motion.
Sure.
Move to adjourn. This is Geller.
Second?
Second by Fitchburg.
Okay, and I assume everyone's in favor.
Aye.
You can put it on your calendar.
Aye.
Third Thursday of the month in October of 2022. You can put it on your calendar now. We'll see. Maybe back in person. We'll bring you pumpkin bars.
let's hope we're in person then. Thank you, everybody. Have a
Thank
good
you
night.
for your support. Thank you.
Thank you.